In the centre of a bygone civilization, a major power shift had occurred. A religious throne lost its splendour. A genius would never paint his masterpiece. Sacred vows of silence were never to occur, and an empire would rise in a following era. The fledgling viper had morphed into a ferocious wolf. A nation born 163 years ago would instead be birthed centuries earlier. Welcome to History's Influence. Before we begin, be sure to like and subscribe to help this small channel grow to great heights. We've just launched our brand new Discord server. Join now to get your early members role. You can support the channel through Patreon or YouTube channel memberships for extra perks. And finally, I'd like to give a huge thanks to Minsak YT, my first patron. This video works as a standalone exploration, but also serves as a sequel to my previous video. The first video focused on the process of an early Italian unification, with the Duchy of Milan achieving such a goal. This video will instead be looking at the implications of having such a kingdom exist so early. Would they complete their Italian unification or be conquered? How would Italy itself develop, and would the Renaissance still occur? What would be the geopolitical ramifications for Europe and the world be? All these questions and more will be answered in this alternate history. To truly unify Italy, this North Italian kingdom will need to annex southern Italy, alongside the islands of Sardinia, Sicily, and possibly Malta. This matter would be existential for Italy, who could not allow foreigners to occupy the south of their peninsula, or have foreigners threaten their western seaboard through the control of the islands. In all of these territories, aside from Sardinia, a kingdom of Sicily was established by the Normans in 1130. By 1289, the island of Sicily had defected to the Crown of Aragon, who also conquered Sardinia by 1326. The new Kingdom of Naples instead came to be ruled by the French Angevin dynasty, tying them both to France and Hungary dynastically. This kingdom continued to be controlled by foreign dynasties, with numerous wars of succession happening as a result. Eventually, Naples would be conquered by Alfonso the Magnanimous of Aragon, who was named heir of Naples beforehand, with his realm later integrated into a unified Spanish monarchy. But an Italian coalition, led by Milan, thwarted both of Alfonso's invasion attempts historically. But in the second invasion, Milan betrayed their allies, releasing the captured Alfonso and helping the Aragonese to acquire Naples. It's a good thing the Spanish didn't go on to conquer Milan. Oh wait. But in this new timeline, his two invasion attempts will end in failure. A Duchy of Milan with weaker Italian enemies would not wish to aid a foreign invasion, and later they would wish to claim the land for themselves. Their casus belli, reason for war, would be a technicality. Relying on their claim on the peninsula through their title of Italy alone may cause an upstir. Naples was officially a fief of the Papal States, whose claim Italy would inherit from their conquest of the papacy. So within a few decades after 1442, when Alfonso did his second invasion of Naples historically, the Italians will launch an invasion of their own. The window of opportunity was open for Italy. Foreign powers would be incapable of intervening. France would be preoccupied with consolidating and conquering French-speaking territory in the mid-1400s. Their 1494 invasion of Naples would have missed the window. The Habsburgs, Archduke of Austria and Emperor of the Holy Roman Empire, wouldn't strongly oppose their nominal subject expanding into foreign lands, and would be preoccupied with Germany and the Balkans regardless. Venice could provide an opposing fleet, but wouldn't pursue total war, lest they have their holdings conquered by the Ottomans. But Aragon will still be salty, and wish to fight Italy for the claim they failed to pursue. But similar to their previous invasion attempts, I believe they will still fail. Aragon's navy was defeated by the city-state of Genoa's navy in Alfonso's invasions. A unified Italian navy, including the Genoese and others, would prove too difficult to defeat. And so, Italy will conquer Naples. You can't blame Aragon or Alfonso for failing solely on naval capabilities, however. Italy's effective military reforms and conquests from Part 1 made them into a military machine suited for continuous conquest. They also held a high population. They would be about 10.5 million by 1500 as an estimate. This is comparable to Germany's 12 million or France's 15 million. This kingdom of Italy would also be incredibly wealthy. Cities such as Milan, Florence, Genoa, and Rome would all be under the control of one kingdom, even if the unique trade arrangements and banking innovations of certain cities will lose their independent practice. Naples would also have been much easier to conquer and hold than the localized cities of northern Italy. It was a monarchy with one central authority, prone to foreign claimants taking control for themselves. The nearby islands would also be easy to acquire. The Italian islands of Sicily and Sardinia were rebellious towards their Aragonese overlords, with rebellions happening as late as 1478 in Sardinia. Italy will use their naval superiority and eventually acquire such islands for themselves. They couldn't allow such an enemy to control islands so close to the Italian heartland. Malta would also be acquired, but the islands won't be given to the crusading order known as the Knights Hospitaller. An overstretched Habsburg Empire delegated the island to such a group so they didn't have to defend it themselves, but Italy wouldn't be nearly as overstretched. Looking back to northern Italy, the next obvious target for Italian expansion would be Savoy, a part French, part Italian duchy, part of the Holy Roman Empire. They expanded their realm in the 1300s and 1400s, similar to Milan, but they were not privy to the communal city development in northern Italy, and did not partake in the Italian Renaissance. Italy would move on to conquer their Italian lands, and a tad of French-speaking land due to the border of the Alps. France would be conquering and consolidating French-speaking territories by this point, so they will go to conquer the French-speaking regions of Savoy. We will now have two strong powers sharing a border, but I think with the Alps, further conquests in each direction would be very difficult. Savoy wouldn't be the only multilingual nation in this area. The pieces of modern Switzerland which speak Italian would have remained part of Milan in this new timeline, because the duchy was able to unify Italy in Part 1, although the Romansh speakers would remain part of the three leagues who were quite close to Switzerland. Moving back to conquests, there would now be only one notable city-state for Italy to conquer within their peninsula, the Republic of Venice. Both the Ottoman Empire and Italy would wish to expand into their territory. Without the terra firma, their lands they held in mainland Italy, Venice would be too weak to resist such enemies, both of whom would have respectable navies. Italy will acquire the city of Venice, but would be too slow to stop the Ottomans from acquiring the rest of their territories. The Ottomans would become a strong geopolitical enemy closer to Italy's borders by this point, but Italy would be growing in its own right, of course. A subsequent European conflict of some nature will eventually see Italy recognised as an independent kingdom. They would leave the Holy Roman Empire with Austria powerless to stop them. They weren't really seeing each other anymore, so I can see why they broke up. Italy will be in a strong position, defended to the north by an Alps mountain range and more broadly by a strong military. The peninsula was also surrounded by sea. They controlled the neighbouring islands, alongside having a strong naval presence. They will have a traditional monarchy in place with a landed nobility, weakening the power of city-based institutions and the merchants of the old trading republics. As mentioned in Part 1, significant rebellions of cities won't be occurring. As a side note, during the process of centralization, the microstate of San Marino will be integrated into Italy, truly unifying the peninsula after Venice. Sorry, I couldn't let them slide in this video. Anyway, it would be good to compare the government of Italy to both Spain and France to see what their trajectory may be. The centralised government in Italy would be stronger than the composite monarchy of Spain, which technically united in 1479 but only became a uniform kingdom in 1707. Italy went through the process of unification under Milanese control, so over the centuries they're going to develop a stronger national unity than the Spanish. Although the later absolutism and central power of France would be difficult to match over time. The intense geographical barriers from the Apennines, etc., and the city-state history of Italy didn't exist in France, so I'd expect their national identity to remain weaker than France's. To cement such a thing, Italy will be adopting an official language for administration. They would ultimately decide on the Florentine dialect of Tuscan, which happened for our 1861 unification historically. It was a language of culture, established by figures such as Dante or Petrarch, before the Renaissance. Petrarch was actually sponsored by Gian Galeazzo, who began the unification of Italy in our first video. In this new timeline, the shift of the capital city from Milan to Rome would have weakened the influence of the Lombard dialect. In fact, Lombard already showed signs of Tuscanization by 1402 historically, with their language not broadly present in other spheres. It wouldn't be the Central Italian language within Rome, as it was already being Tuscanized by the 1400s, but it's important to note that the Italian languages were divided into separate branches of the Romance family, which all stem from ancient Latin. But similar to how French assimilated the Occitan language, the Tuscan dialect will end up assimilating the separate branches eventually. Whilst North Italy was quite wealthy by this point, the South would struggle economically and still had a relatively separate cultural history. South Italy would be more developed and wealthy under a unified kingdom, but not to the same degree as North Italy. They wouldn't have communal institutions, and the rule wouldn't be as oppressive from their cultural kin, although the cultural and linguistic assimilation to the Italian identity will be slower than the North. We also won't be seeing the mafia exist as a result. This means no one killed for violating the omerta, a vow of silence and a vow to deny the existence of the organization, hence that strange part of the intro. And it also means no Godfather or Goodfellas in this new timeline. Now we've got a picture of the political and economic situation of Italy in this new timeline. But what about the Renaissance itself, one of the most formative developments in Italian and more broadly European history? The Renaissance describes a cultural movement which truly began in Florence at the beginning of the 15th century, spreading to Italy and the rest of Europe to last over a century. It marked the transition from the Middle Ages into the modern era. The formative developments for the Renaissance will still have occurred in this new timeline though. We still have the economic growth of Italy, alongside the discovery of ancient Roman and Greek writings, on topics ignored during the medieval era, for example literature, history, oratory pieces, etc. The man who began the unification of Italy in this new timeline, Gian Galeazzo, was a patron of the Proto-Renaissance himself. He founded the University of Pavia, and brought the renowned Greek scholar Manuel Chrysolorus to Milan, and the Duomo of Milan began its construction during his reign. His successors would follow suit, but only the king and his high nobles would really be capable of replicating such city-state patronage. This would subdue the effects of the Renaissance. For example, we will see the weakening of the High Renaissance, which flourished from 1490 to 1528. The cultural and propagandistic support of the city-states would instead be applied to the newly unified Italian kingdom. You see, this great kingdom had driven the barbarian foreigners out and unified the squabbling states of the peninsula. The kings and nobility would construct architecture taller than the communal and religious buildings, not having a rule for the opposite like you saw in Republican Florence. Another occurrence you'd see in Florence would be the Renaissance man, polymath geniuses who existed in surprisingly high quantity during the Renaissance. They'll be decreasing in appearance in this new timeline without the same freedoms and educational opportunities allotted to citizens of free city-states. This could mean the loss of a Da Vinci or Michelangelo. Michelangelo's father, for example, was a low-class notary. The ideals of Renaissance humanism these individuals espoused and exuded would be moderated to appeal to the monarchy. A righteous, educated, and beautiful life pursued on earth, not heaven, was advocated for, alongside the importance of receiving guidance and wisdom from the ancient pagans, the Greeks and Romans. Important adoptions or inventions such as the popularity of oil painting or the invention of linear perspective in paintings will still likely occur. These examples happened before or in the very early 1400s, before Italy would have changed drastically in internal structure from their unification. But other advancements would still be up in the air. Take the Gregorian calendar, implemented by Pope Gregory XIII in 1582. It was made using prior Renaissance work and also the wealth of the Papal States who had a strong secular power base, which they won't be having being conquered in this new timeline. But focusing just on technology, pre-existing developments throughout Europe will prevent technological advancement from changing drastically. The scientific method and other such approaches were already being implemented. The printing press would still be developed in Germany in the mid-1400s, for example. We'll also see the broader European Renaissance continue to occur, even if Italy's contributions are reduced. Take the famous Spanish novel Don Quixote, or the plays of Shakespeare. Later cultural developments would be more difficult to predict, for example the subsequent Baroque period in art. So, let's instead move on to Italy's geopolitical situation and how they would fare as an established European power. Italy's strength will keep it from foreign occupation. but its existence would adjust the dynamics of Europe and beyond. Starting with Iberia, Castile and Aragon would still have created a unified Spain in 1479. A politically opportune marriage between Isabella and Ferdinand would not have been prevented with Italian politics faring differently. But without control in Italy, Spain's dynamic with Italy and France may fluctuate, jeopardizing any royal marriages to Austria. I believe this uncertainty will cause the Austrian Habsburgs to never come onto the Spanish throne. For more details, I have a video about what would happen if the Spaniards were not ruled by the Habsburgs. It also includes outcomes with the Dutch revolt and other such consequences. This prevention of union would also mean the Habsburg versus French rivalry won't be as pronounced. Moving forward, Christians would not be the only neighbours to Italy. The Ottoman Empire would have a stronger position in Europe through their acquisition of the Venetian territories. In our own timeline, the Ottomans captured the Italian city of Otranto in 1480. The Italians worked together in a coalition to fight such a threat. In this new timeline, the Italians will be more effective. The combined Italian and Spanish naval presence in the Mediterranean, for example, will prevent the Ottomans from making the Barbary pirates of North Africa nominal subjects. Spain and Italy would eventually work to conquer North Africa. Spain wouldn't be preoccupied defending their Dutch or Italian holdings, they wouldn't have them, and Italy will be a wealthy nation with no major preoccupations. Being quite powerful, I wouldn't expect one or the other to overcome each other's conquests. They may have some border disputes though. Both would fail to Christianize the region, however, something the Portuguese struggled to do with their Islamic holdings in Morocco, for example. So we know the Ottomans would fail in the distant Maghreb, but they would still prevail in the Balkans, right? Where the naval capabilities of Italy wouldn't match their mighty land empire. Whilst that's true, the Ottomans are still going to decline centuries later, as what happened historically. It's in this context that Italy is going to partake in the annexation of Ottoman territories, alongside the Austrians and later Russians. This would create further tension in the region with another competing power, which may boil over into an industrial scale conflict. It's always some damn thing in the Balkans, isn't it? But we're getting ahead of ourselves. Let's look at Europe more broadly. The existence of Italy isn't going to alter the balance of power within Europe too strongly. One nation won't be conquering the rest, it'd be the opposite. Spain and Austria won't be unifying, for example, and Italy would be a further counterweight for other unification efforts. Although I do believe the religious balance would shift in this new timeline, in favour of Protestantism. We would still have a precedent of discontent in movements such as the Hussites or Waldensians, and the printing press would still allow for the spreading of dangerous ideas. But in this new timeline, the secular power of the Papal States would be crushed, leaving the Pope simply as a spiritual authority in Rome. We won't see the corrupt excess of the bourgeois and Medici popes during the Renaissance, selling indulgences and cardinal seats for the patronage of culture, pursuit of warfare, and to serve the interests of their families and supporters. Instead, the Kingdom of Italy will serve as a source of corruption, with their capital in the heart of the papacy. They would influence papal politics just as the French did, if not worse, during the Western Schism, when one of the claimant popes was seated in the French city of Avignon. The authority of the Church will wane, and Italian rivals such as France will be more likely to adopt forms of Protestantism, whilst Italy will remain Catholic. We won't have the Catholic monarchy of Charles V to defend against Protestantism in Germany, for example, allowing for a more effective spread in an earlier period. A counter-reformation will still occur, however, prevent total Protestant domination, and to weaken forms of humanism. Past Europe, it would be worth discussing European colonialism. Christopher Columbus was born in 1450 in the Italian city-state of Genoa. In this new timeline, he will instead be born into a unified Italy, which would not control the Greek islands which Genoa controlled, where he travelled in his early years. But regardless if these butterfly effect lifestyle changes prevent Columbus from seeking an ocean-based voyage, Portugal will still be fated to become a trading empire with their advancements in ship technology and their sailing to South Africa before Columbus's voyage. So even without Columbus, the Spanish are likely to pursue their own voyages in suit, already occurring in a smaller scale with their colonization of the Canary Islands, unlike the disinterested English or French by this point. But would Italy get involved? The Italians would need access through Gibraltar to partake. Genoa used to have colonies in Spain alongside banking roles, But a unified Italy won't be allowed to do this, they'd be a rival power. The Mamluks and later Ottomans would control Egypt, so they would lock Italy out of being able to colonise the Indian Ocean. The economic growth, improvement of financial instruments, naval technology, and the advancement of governmental institutions are colonial benefits that Italy will not reap. However, the Columbian exchange of foods, animals, peoples, ideas, etc. will still benefit Italy, providing many of the key ingredients in the Italian foods we know and love today. Whether it's the tomato you taste in a fine pizza from Naples, or the tomato you taste in canned spaghetti. This wouldn't be the end of Italy's colonial ambitions, however. We discussed before how Italy would conquer Ottoman lands in the Balkans, but they would also be poised to conquer further lands with further decline. They would eventually take Egypt as a colony. The British did so historically, but I believe they would be blocked from doing so from Italy existing. They wouldn't be able to acquire Malta, for example, with Italian resistance keeping them in check. This would weaken the British Empire and allow for Italy to become a key global power after their period of not being able to colonise. This prestigious late colonial empire would bring them great wealth. They would construct the Suez Canal as well, giving them a major leg up in international trade. It would be too speculatory to predict the fate and expansion of Italy's colonies, or the colonial outcomes of other nations, so we'll leave the discussion there. Assuming British industrialisation still happens, Italy's lack of coal deposits mean that it will still remain on the lagging end of the industrial scale. But their centralised military and economic tradition by this point will keep them in a respectable position. It would also reduce Italian, particularly southern Italian, immigration into European colonies in the Americas, Australia, etc. So, Italy will be more homogenous and powerful than in our own timeline, but still be limited by the realities of being late to colonialism alongside issues with industrialisation. Any predictions past this point would be folly, so we'll be leaving it there for this video. This has been History's Influence. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed it, as much as I enjoyed making this two-part series. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Catch you later.